years ago on Friday, December 12th, 44 black journalists met in a Washington, D.C. hotel that led to the founding of the National Association of Black Journalists. One of those folks joins us right now, Sandra Long Weaver. Glad to have you here on the show. Sandra, where were you working at the time?
Hello, Roland. Thank you for having me. I was a reporter for the Wilmington, Delaware News Journal. It was my first job out of college.
How did you find out about this meeting?
I found out through I had joined. Even Wilmington, Delaware is about 30 miles away from Philadelphia, and I had joined the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. I would drive up once a month to Philadelphia to meet other black journalists because there were no other black journalists in my newsroom. It was pretty much me. There was a black sports reporter, but he worked at night, so I never saw him.
So Philadelphia had a journalism chapter before there was a National Association of Black Journalists.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And and that's what happened across the country. There were a number of cities that had journalism chapters. And then once the national was founded, they folded into the national as well. But Philadelphia was there first. In the Philadelphia area, we like to think of ourselves as the founding chapter of the national organization.
So the list that we're seeing right here, that literally is, guys, if you go back to that, please, and just freeze it for me. That actually was a sheet that was passed around where folk actually signed. In the documentary, Dwayne Wickham, who was the later became president, NABJ, one of your fellow founders, he said, we didn't really even know we were founders. We were just like at a meeting.
Right.
So take us into that meeting. What was the discussion like? How long did it last?
Let's see now, this is 50 years ago. So, but I know we were there for more than an hour, and there were actually more than 44 of us, because there was a sheet, an attendance sheet of those who attended this meeting. And we had gotten, some of us were able to get our news organizations to send us to DC to cover a black gathering of legislators. And so, but we were pulling together as black journalists to talk about why can't we have a national organization as well. So that's why we gathered. And I remember I sat on the floor. It was in a hotel room. It was crowded. And as the yellow sheet came around, some of us signed, some of us did not. There were people who were concerned. I have a family. I can't sign this. I may lose my job. So that was a concern that you had to think about. I was 23, very young, and I said, well, I'm going to sign it. I'm here. I want to be a part of this movement. I want to know other black journalists and, having the same issues that I'm having, navigating your newsroom, getting stories on the front page, getting those good assignments in your newsroom. How did we do all of that? How could we make that work for us?
And was there a backlash?
If there was a backlash, I did not feel it. I felt support from my white colleagues in my newsroom for being a part of this organization. But there were people who wondered, well, why do we need a black organization? You can be a part of something else, or but really you couldn't. And the issues were different. They didn't address the issues or concerns that we had.
But also what people don't understand is this is 1975. The Kerner Commission report came out in 1968. They didn't agree on much, but that report said that they were there to study the race riots of 67. And they said there were two Americas, one white, one black, and they largely blamed news media for lack of representation in those newsrooms. So really, y'all were part of the first wave of black journalists who went into white newsrooms. Really, after that 68 report, we're talking about 69, 70. So really that first 5 to 7 years, that was the first wave of black journalists being hired at what was before white newsrooms.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Because there were a few newsrooms that had one or two. If they had more than one or two black journalists, it was an exception. But most newsrooms didn't have any black journalists. So they weren't in the communities. They weren't covering the issues of the communities. Not only just covering the issues, the concerns, but also the good things of what is black life about? What is it like? There was no cultural coverage of what was going on. So yeah, we were in that first wave and often had to fight to get the stories that we felt were important to the black community on the front page or even into the newspaper, because they didn't always, white editors, mostly men, white male editors, did not see the importance of the stories that we also felt were important. And there certainly were not black editors who were in the news meetings to advocate for your story. So you really had to learn how to navigate the newsroom and push for the stories that you felt were important to get them recognized.
You obviously, over the last 50 years, saw an increase in influx, more next generation, wave after wave after wave. But then you still had a lot of media outlets that still had one or two, very few executives in charge. Now we're seeing even more contraction, where we're seeing jobs lost, and we're seeing in many of these places where it's black journalists who are on the cutting board, the ones who are getting laid off. And so it's sort of like back to the future, if you will.
And in a lot of ways, Roland, it is. That's one of the things that NABJ had done and continues to do a good job of really pushing for black journalists to be hired, but not just hired and coming in the door and doing the entry level jobs, but being hired into positions where you're directing coverage, where you're throughout the newsroom. When I was hired, there were no black copy editors. There were no black entertainment writers. There was no black city editor. All of those positions now, you can, in looking across the country, you can often find black journalists who are in those positions. But to your point, especially in newsrooms, when newspapers started to contract, and not just newspapers, but also television stations. It was the last hired, first fired. And because we weren't there from the beginning, often we are the first ones who are fired. So again, then you're still recycling, still trying to hire more people, especially black journalists, to come into the business.
Question for my panelists. I'll start with you first, Raven.
Well, thank you so much for sharing these insights and your experience with us. I'm so curious to hear in this moment where we're seeing tremendous white backlash and sort of this reversal of so many of the gains that you've made, what path you see forward for black journalists today. How do we continue to fight the good fight?
The same way we always have. We still push for stories in our newsrooms, but in today's world, there's also more opportunity for online coverage. The program that we're doing, programs like Roland's did not exist in 1975 or even in 1980. It's been years getting to this point. So it's pushing for the stories, creating alliances in your newsroom, making sure that you don't give up. You still have to, it's the resilience. We talk about being resilient, and that's why we're still here 50 years later. And we do excellent work. So our work needs to be recognized across the board. You have to continue to tell the stories of what's going on in the black community, what's important to us. We used to say, once you get your foot in the door, then you have to bring somebody else also behind you. You advocate for someone else that you know in the business who should be in your newsroom, who can make that difference in the coverage that you're that should be going on.
Omekongo?
Thank you so much for the legacy that you have set for so many of us. My question regards AI. How do you see the future of not only journalism, but particularly as it relates to Black journalists getting their foot in the door when people are competing so much with AI and writing stories and newsrooms disappearing? Are you concerned about that? Have you experienced something like this similar in the past? What are your thoughts as it relates to that going forward?
When the internet first came onto the scene in the not mid to late 90s, there was concern that Black journalists may lose jobs then. Every time
Mm-hmm.
there is a change in technology, something that can push things forward, there's always that concern. AI is a concern, but we're on the front end of it where we can also start to use it to tell better stories, to really ramp up the ethics and to know the difference. We also have to educate our readers too, and not just our readers, but also our viewers, so they know the difference between a voice that's not authentic. And that's one of the big differences that we as Black journalists have. We have authentic voices. We can use AI to enhance our stories, but use it, making sure that we're being ethical about it. I don't see it as something we should fear, but something that we should really learn how to use and do better work to expand what we're doing, to reach other people who aren't really connected to us. So I think we should see it as an opportunity and take advantage of it.
Teresa.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm here in the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. So I definitely do see the work that we do locally and nationally. So thank you so much for your initial service and continued advocacy. I think one of my concerns is always in the DEI and minority space, as I do run a business. And I was wondering about the advocacy, especially with all the slice coming down from the federal level of the lack of using the term diversity, equity, and inclusion. Wanted to see what maybe in a BJ's role would be on advocating to make sure that minority businesses still have a seat at the table.
Well, I'll actually, before Sandra jumps in, since I'm back on the board as Vice President Digital, it is different. It's a huge change.
Mm-hmm.
We saw a dramatic decrease in the number of companies recruiting at our convention in Cleveland this year compared to last year. We are preparing ourselves, I dare say fortifying ourselves for the next 3 years because the companies that frankly didn't really want to do this work, Trump has given them reason not to do it. So one of the things that we are also looking at when we talk about advocacy is still challenging these companies to say, if you are committed, then are you really committed? I think the key is what we can't do, and Sandra, and I guess for me, I guess I'm sort of in a different position than some of our younger members in that, we had our founders in 75. I joined NABJ in 1989, so we were 14 years old. And so many of those founders I met, I knew, I talked to, I sat at their feet, I listened to them. So the spirit of a Chuck Stone, our first president, a Les Payne, a Vernon Jarrett, I could go on and on and on. So, I carry that with me. And so when the challenging of going into those meetings, going to those advocacy meetings, it's a little different than folks who didn't know those folks, who didn't listen to those war stories, who didn't, frankly, and many of them, like especially Vernon, actually, not mandated. Well, I will say mandated. Wanted to hear that I was committed to following in their footsteps. So what we have to do is we have to, I believe, let next generation know, frankly, you can't punk out. You can't get weak. You can't accept you can't accept less. There's a level of, I dare say, militancy that is still needed among leadership to challenge these media companies.
Yeah. Roland, I'm in absolute agreement with you on that point. And you do, when you say you can't punk out, and that's what I talk about, the resilience. And we have been resilient. We did not give up. There's a number of times I thought I should have gotten a promotion, did not get it. I didn't quit the business. I hung in. I came around and tried to come in a different way. When I did leave the Philadelphia Inquirer in 2011, I was a vice president for news for the Inquirer and for the Daily News. And that was also a period in 2011 when you were starting to combine news desks and copy desks and how we produced newspapers. So again, change in the business and how we did things. But we can't. We have to hang in. If we don't continue to tell our stories, then somebody else is going to tell that narrative. And that's not what we want. And from the very beginning, we wanted to be able to tell our stories, make sure that we are there. And also, NABJ does include people from the Black press. And the Black press has been there for almost 200 years now, telling stories of what's going on in the Black community and how we've been impacted. I've also worked for the Black press. I've almost 10 years spent time at the Tennessee Tribune and telling stories and getting a different perspective of what it was like from those freedom riders who are now dying off. But their stories of what they did to push us forward as well. So
I came up with this idea that our board accepted this Jubilee Endowment campaign
yes.
because where we are now is we've spent all of these years, Sandra, fighting for African Americans to be in these places. And listen, we've got individuals who are NABJ members who are making $3, $4, $5, $8, $10, $20 million. And the reality is we now have to look inward. So one of the things that we've done with this, the goal is to raise $15 million over 4 years. Over the past 50 years, we've had different people talk about we need an endowment. We have investments, but we do not have an actual endowment. And
right.
Part of this is that they have what I call a golden circle. And that's to get 100 individuals or corporations to contribute a minimum of $100,000 each. If 100 folks do that, that'll raise $10 million. So we're 2/3 the way towards our goal. And that's a $25,000 commitment each year. I've said to many of those folks, look, you need the tax breaks. So you're going to give your money away to somebody. So you might as well do NABJ. But this is one of the things that I have been saying on this show for a very long time. And by getting back on the board and why we had to do this is because in this moment where Black institutions, as I keep saying, is that MAGA wants to defund Black America. This is where we are going to have to fortify Black institutions. I would love for Mackenzie Scott, who's given more than $700 million to HBCUs, would love for her to cut a check to NABJ. But look, I don't even know how to reach her. But the bottom line is we have to have members of our organizations, whether it's NABJ, whether it's National Society of Black Engineers, whether it's National Black MBAs, we need to have members who are ensuring the future survival of our organizations. And that's why we have this endowment campaign.
Yeah, and I think it's a great campaign, and I think it will push us forward for the next 50 years. It is still amazing to me that we have survived. We're still here. We're thriving. We grew from 44 members to over 4,000 in this 50 years. And we're still attracting new members. Young people are still coming into the organization, depending on us for scholarships, for training, and training, not just on an entry level, but also training to move up into your newsroom, to run a newsroom, to run a company. All of those things are depending on us. So this endowment, you're right, will fortify us, help us go forward and be an even stronger organization as we head toward move into the future.
Well, as always, I remember we were at, I forgot which convention, and Barbara Sierra was the president, and she gave me the President's Award. And I stood up and I said, guys, as an alpha, we never have any events where we don't recognize our seven jewels. I said, and we have too many NABJ events with founders sitting in our presence and we don't even recognize them. So so folks started changing that after that. I said, that should never happen. So I'm always appreciative of the folks who paved the way for those of us to be able to be NABJ members now, today. And so, Sandra, thanks for your service. We appreciate it. And we're going to keep walking in those footsteps, giving them hell.
All right. And thank you, Roland. I appreciate all that you do. And as in that documentary, Norma Wade Adams said, the torch has been passed and the young people picked it up. You picked it up and then we're still passing it on to that next generation. So it's greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.
Folks, if you want more information on the NABJ Jubilee Endowment Campaign, go to the NABJ website at nabjonline.org. Go to my iPad. Come on. This is the campaign. If you go to nabjonline.org, you got more information. And we'll be adding the links very soon. Trust me, I'll be calling the national office. So if you want to make a contribution to the endowment campaign, you can.
This is your chance to own a piece of the creator economy. And with Start Engine, investing in Fanbase couldn't be easier. Just visit startengine.com/fanbase and click Get Equity. Opportunities like this don't stay open long, but your investment can help build a platform that pushes the future of social media forward.